Argostars. Are they really as bad as people say? Hello guys, and welcome back to another cold episode. On today's episode, we are taking a look at Argostars, and I'm genuinely trying to find out if this is actually as bad as people are making it out to be, or if it actually has more merit than people are letting on. So, real quick, if you don't know, Argostars are the newest archetype to come to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, and they focus on trap monsters. More specifically, continuous trap monsters that can reset themselves during either player's turn. You could just place this face-up card into your spell and trap card zone. So, pretty good. They just reset themselves very efficiently, meaning you can use them over the course of multiple turns, which is pretty solid. However, from what I perceived them to be, prior to ever actually interacting with them and playing against them, nor playing them, I thought that they would be on the same tier as something like Warrock. One of those terrible, no good, very bad archetypes that is just genuinely a bad idea, doesn't really accomplish a whole lot, and doesn't really work very well. Now, Warrock has the problem of being a deck that wants its battle phase. However, all of their cards are so bad that even if you were to use the battle phase, they don't really accomplish anything enough to really beat any sort of deck realistically. So, what does Argostar do? Are they better? Are they worse? Let's find out. Starting off, we're going to just quickly go through the card by card. Argostars are pretty nice because they are Earth Warriors, which is not bad. Because that means that you can play a whole bunch of warrior support as well if you wanted to. Like, for example, we could be playing Rhoda. I decided not to play Rhoda. I don't think it's too necessary, but it is fairly decent. But they do center around this one card. If this card resolves, it's fantastic. If it doesn't, it's pretty bad. And I'll explain why. On normal summon of this card, this turn, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects in response to the activation of your continuous trap cards or their effects. Pretty decent, right? That means that if it resolves, you are then able to be not interacted with. Pretty solid. However, you can also then use the follow-up effect, which banishes this card you control to place 2 Argostar continuous traps with different names from your hand and or deck face up in your spell and trap card zone, which is fairly decent. Being able to put 2 continuous traps immediately face up is pretty good. If almost any other deck could do this, this would be pretty decent. Now, what do these cards accomplish? Starting off with Lightning, we have the ability to once per turn discard a card in order to special summon this as an effect monster with 2000 and is a Warrior Light level 4. And then also adds a Argostar card from deck to your hand. Once it's summoned, you add a card. So it's pretty good. Just discard, special summon. So off the effect of Adra, you can then search an additional card, which is pretty good. We also have Swift, which is has a similar effect. However, once per turn, if a continuous trap is in your monster zone, you can special summon this card as an 18/18. And then you, if you have a banished Argostar monster, you can gain 500. Hooray! You gain some life points. That's it. That's pretty much all it does. Now, granted, all of these also have effects while they are face up in the spell and trap card zone. Lightning gives you additional attack and defense. Swift here prevents your warrior monsters from being destroyed by battle, which is something. It's an effect, that's for sure. However, Slayer does have a fairly decent one as well, which prevents your warrior monsters from being destroyed by card effect, which is probably the best of the face-up effects. That being said, it also has one of the best effects when summoned, which is also kind of problematic. But what it does say is once per turn, when your opponent activates a card or effect, you can special summon this card. Then, if you have a banished Argostar monster, you can return a card on the field to the hand. Now, I think you maybe you may have missed this, but both Swift and Slayer require Adra, or more specifically an Argostar, to be banished to even do anything outside of just putting a body onto the field. So it's not exactly the greatest in terms of being able to use them effectively as disruption. However, that's where the field spell comes in. Home Stadium. Home Stadium, we're playing 3 of it. Says once per turn, you can pay 1,000 life points to add an Argostar back from grave or banishment to your hand. Pretty decent. However, because we want Adra in the banish, we don't actually want to add this back, which is counterintuitive. But okay, it's not terrible. Like, you can use it on the following turn. It's still fine. However, Each time a continuous trap is special summoned from your spell and trap card zone, you can inflict 500. Pretty decent, just a nice additional effect. And once per chain, if a continuous trap activates its effect in your monster zone, you can banish an Argostar. While you have a banished Argostar monster, you can target a face-up card your opponent controls and negate its effects until the end of the turn. That is a very good effect. The problem is, similar to everything else, it requires too much setup. Or does it? It does. I'm lying to you. It does. It requires a bit too much setup, right? Requiring the monsters to still be banished, requiring you to then activate the effect in your monster zone instead of in your spell and trap card zone, and it is a once per chain effect that negates in addition. So it is a negate, but it's kind of a clunky negate, and is not exactly the cleanest of things to do. And again, it all centers around resolving Adra. If Adra is banished, this deck does stuff. It has like up to 4 negates, or 4 interactions technically, off of 1 Adra, right? Adra searches Lightning, Lightning discards a card to add the field spell, and then with, you know, Slayer as well, then Adra can put itself back, and then you have the home stadium to add back potentially your discard or what have you, and then if you have the Swift, you can use the Slayer as a bounce, you can use Lightning and Swift to then, you know, special summon them, and then you could also put them back into the back row, which would then trigger Stadium up to 3 times, because all 3 of them can put themselves back into the back row, which means 1, 2, 3 interactions, or 3 negates, theoretically, right? All of that is theoretically what you can do. Not bad. On top of that, you can pair that with things like Azuroon, or Apophis, or Statue of Anguish pattern, in order to get additional points of interaction. Not bad, right? On top of that, we also have a few other Argostar cards. We have Fierce Parth, which is a card that it's just kind of big. That's mostly what it does. You also have the ability to reveal this card in order to special summon it from hand, which is pretty good, by bouncing one of your Argostar continuous traps. So you can, you know, use something like your Lightning in order to then bounce it back to hand with this, or more specifically, you can like put Swift into the spell and trap card zone, and then bounce it back to hand in order to special summon this guy alongside the Lightning, and then kind of go from there. There's a few other things that you can do with it. It's not like, this is honestly not that great of an effect. You can also banish it in order to set a continuous trap from the hand that can be then activated that turn. Not great, again, but is kind of okay, because it allows you access to like Lightning alongside it, and then you can use Lightning as like a starter to search out one of your other cards, which is, again, fairly decent. So we're playing 2 of that as well. Kind of a decent normal summon. We also have Giant Slaying, which just adds an Argostar monster. However, if you have a face-up spell and trap, you can then normal summon a monster after searching, which is pretty decent. And then during your main phase, you can banish it in order to target 2 cards in Argostar continuous trap and another card on the field and return them to the hand. So it is also technically removal, which is pretty good. So we're playing 3 of that as well, because you also have additional ways to Adra. That's mostly what we are aiming to do here. For the rest of the cards, it is pretty standard non-engine, 3 Imfit, 2 Maxi. We're also playing 3 Nibiru. We don't need to worry about like getting Maxied or Fuwood ourselves, so instead of playing like Ash or Called By or something like that, we're playing Nibiru, which is very, very useful. It came up a bunch. We're also playing 1 Fuwood loss. It was the 40th card. We're also playing the 3 Terror Top as well as the 1 Takatomborg, because we can go into Invoker. Invoker can then special summon out the Adra and then go from there. I also decided to play the DPE package, because I believe, hey, if I can put 2 monsters onto the field and make Verte into Anaconda, Verte into DPE, I'm gonna do that. So we're playing the 1 Dasher, the 1 Celestial, newly unbanned, and then the 2 Fusion Destiny, as well as DPE and Verte in the extra. We're also playing a whole bunch of other cards that we can technically make. We have the Invoker, we have Fortune Tune for like Zeus lines, we have the 1 Bamboozling Gossip Shadow, we have a bunch of rank 4s because all of these monsters are 4s, so you could potentially go into like Dweller, or into Redoer, or Baguska, or Dugaris, or what have you. I also have Typhon in here, and then of course Double Zeus, and then a few Link monsters, most notably the Silhouette Rat, because we were able to use it in order to set either an Argostar, or more likely something like a Statue of Anguish pattern or an Apophis, which is also very, very good. So that's it for the deck. Let's hop into the replays and show you how this deck performs. Alright, here we are going second, and that is Maxi Fuwolos, so this is already off to a great start. My opponent is going to start with the better luck to grab up the Leon and take 15. Out comes the Leon. I'm going to activate the Maxi, and they will allow me to draw even more cards. Luckily, all of these cards that I'm drawing are pretty much useless. I don't think I drew a single card that actually mattered there that entire time, so that's kind of tragic. And then we drew the Slayer, which is actually not that bad. They're also going to activate the Maxi here as well, which is kind of funny because it doesn't matter. I don't do anything here. We're going to go for the Adra, and at this point, my opponent just goes for start your engines. I don't really have anything. But I did draw into, I believe, a second lightning, so we'll just set 4 and pass. I specifically don't put it here because if I were to, they could just pop the Nitro token, and then away it goes. But here we're going to go for the lightning to wrap up the Giant Slayer and just have this on field for, specifically this is for the Apophis, so that's why I did that. They're going to go into Chariot Carry and activate its effect. I'm just not going to allow that. That just generates way too much advantage. I'm also going to activate the second lightning in our back row, just as a secondary negate. So we're going to negate the continuous spell as well, because the rest of these don't really matter. Out comes Pep, and then they go into the Gossip Shadow. Now, I did kind of... here's the thing. They could have, I believe, killed me here, if I'm not mistaken. And the reason I say this is because if they had activated the effect of their Psychic and Punisher to banish instead of going into the Gossip Shadow, they could have then walked into the Nitro token, as well as, I believe, into pretty much any one of these with actually, no, maybe they wouldn't have been able to do that. Yeah, maybe they wouldn't have. But if they had been 1,000 lower, I think I wouldn't have had access to really do anything, because they would have been at 6k. No, yeah, I guess they wouldn't have killed me. Never mind. They could have done more damage, though. They just walked over the guy. It doesn't really matter here. They're going to go for the... sorry. They used the Gossip Shadow earlier on our Argostars, so that's what ended up happening. That's why they drew a card. Anyway, they banish with the Pep here, and that's a-okay with me. And yeah, at this point, we pretty much have everything that we need. So I draw a Dasher for turn, which is very, very funny. But then we're going to go for the Field Spell, which now we can affect the Pep because we're lower life points than them. We're going to go for the Adra. Adra effect is going to activate. We're going to then attack out into these two. I go for Swift, and then I realize immediately that I have made a mistake because now the Pep is affected. However, I did kind of need to do this, and you'll see why in a second. So we're going to go Pierce here Fierce in order to go into Verte. Verte is going to pay 2,000 to make the DPE so that we can then use DPE in order to deal with the problem that is actually on the field. So we just remove the Psychic and Punisher, and at this point my opponent pretty much doesn't have anything. Likely this card is either Imperm, which they probably would have used, or more specifically it's probably Called By, which doesn't really do anything. We're going to go for the pop on the Better Luck, and they are going to activate the Called By, to which I will meet them with the Apophis and negate their Called By. I'm also going to flip up the other guy just so that we can. They're going to burn, and at this point the game is over and pretty much locked up. Out comes DPE. We're going to just switch everything to combat, or to attack, and go to combat. So, there we go. That's how it's done. Good game. Alright, here we are going first, and let's see what we can accomplish here. We do have Terror Top and Takatomborg, but we do have Terror Top, which is pretty nice. So we're going to start off here with the Terror Top into Takatomborg, and I'm actually going to go for the Silhouette Rat because we already have access to Adra, so I figured... why not go Silhouette? It's much better. We're going to go for the Giant Slayer in order to grab up the Adra, and then Adra Normal Summon. We're going to activate the effect of the Adra as well, in order to then banish and set 2. This then allows us to activate our Lightning, which can grab up the Home Stadium. We're going to activate the Home Stadium, activate the effects to grab back the Trap card for additional use later, and then pass the turn. Let's see what we can accomplish here. My opponent is going to reveal that they're on Fiendsmith, and I'm like, oh, cool. I'll just wait and Nibiru you. That's pretty much it. I don't really need to do anything, and I don't want to special summon any of my monsters, because if I do, they're just going to be eaten by Nibiru. So, yeah, that's fine. It does force me to kind of get rid of the Silhouette Rat, but that's okay. It's just spell trap removal. They're going to go into sequence, and now I could Nibiru here, but I specifically wanted them to shuffle away the Lacrima, because of course they're going to. And so I'm like, okay, shuffle away the Lacrima. This allows me access to just, like, remove pretty much all of their follow-up, which is very nice. So, that's what I did here. They go for this guy, and I go, here's Nibiru. Now you can't do anything on my turn, and, like, go into Desiree and dump and stuff like that. Now we can go for the Statue of Anguish pattern. They then reveal the continuous spell for Sacred Beasts, right? And I'm like, oh, that's not allowed. So we're going to special summon here, which is not exactly, like, the greatest. But I was like, okay, that, like, kills me. If they do the Ubel combo, like, I'm just dead. Anyway, we're also going to then special here because they just went to end phase. So we're going to pop, and they had cross out, and they could have crossed out Nibiru, except for the fact that I checked their deck after, and they're not playing Nibiru. I don't know why they're playing Crossout and not playing Nibiru as a Crossout target. But hey, you do you, boo. Whatever floats your boat. We just put these two back into the back row, and now we can add back our Adra, and then also we can banish to bounce. I just kind of wanted to force this out. They banished the Silhouette Rat, and that's fantastic for me. So we just bounce our monster back to your hand, and then we can just put two more into the back row. We're going to special summon here, and then just go to combat, and we have lethal here, because we can just tag out in the main, or in the battle phase, and deal additional damage, playing around things like Nibiru or what have you. I don't think we were under Nibiru at that point. Or I don't think we could have been Nibiru at that point, but you get the point, right? Playing around like Valor and what have you. So, yeah, we beat Fiendsmith. Alright, and here we are once again going second, which is not bad. Our hand did consist of Maxi, which is something. My opponent's going to go for the Lordly Load to grab a Drill Beam, which is rather interesting, and there's the barrel, setting the second Lordly Load. I'm going to activate the Maxi at this point, and they're just going to send Gogiga Gagagigo to the graveyard, which was not the card that I was expecting. But then right after, they activate the effect of the Lordly Load in order to grab Gagagigo from their deck and special summon it in defense position. That's interesting. Then they activate Fish Sonar and I go, oh, this makes a bit more sense. But at this point, we only really have to contest with the one known Drill Beam. Let's see what we can do. Maxi is hard carrying. They do activate a Maxi as well, which I am not too concerned about. However, the Adra immediately gets negated and banished. So, yeah, can't really do anything about that. I'm just going to set 3 and pass. But luckily, because Drill Beam did banish our Adra, we do have the ability to use Slayer, which is pretty nice. They're going to go for the Electric Jellyfish. I actually activate the Slayer here. This is a bit of a mistake. I forgot that this card doesn't do anything unless Umi is on the field. Whoops. My bad. However, I do not want them to have access to the Huzuma, what's it, in hand. So the reason I did this was because I was like, oh, I will, I will, you know, try and force out the Spell Trap Negate. This card's so much worse than I had originally anticipated. It requires Umi, and it is a spell or monster effect, not a trap. So I didn't need to use Slayer. This is just me not reading the card. That's my bad. This just didn't need to happen. But it's fine for the most part. I just imperm. I just imperm. It works. I imperm, and then I bounce this guy, and Maxi happens. So there's that. They also then go for the Giga Gagagigo. So there's that. However, they do end up going to combat, and I just put Slayer back into the back row, because even with the boost from Lightning, it wouldn't be enough. So I was just like, okay, that's fine. We'll just put it back. We draw Slayer for turn, which isn't great, but we're just going to elect to bounce here. I just want to bounce that guy and get it back into their hand. And the reason for this is because that means that they would either have to normal summon that or normal summon Barrel, and they can't do both. And if they normal summon Barrel, they would get access to Drill Beam, but if they normal summon the other guy, they would get access to the Floodgate. So I'm just kind of like forcing that to be in their hand for them to actually like do something there. But now we can finally go for Lightning, and Lightning can grab us the Field Spell, and Field Spell can grab us the Adra, and we can just pop off from here. This really is like a turn 4 style deck, which is the biggest problem with it. It's just a little too slow. If it was a turn 3 deck, I think it would be a little bit better, but because it kind of relies on you going first, or yeah, I guess technically it's also a turn 3 deck. It's just a little too slow is the problem. I do make a bit of a goof here though, because I activate I set the Argostars Swift without then having a continuous trap on the field for it to then special summon. So I do activate the effect, and then I go, oh right, I can't do that, and I can't trigger the Silhouette. So whoops. What I should have done is gone for Lightning and then pitched the Swift to search out like something else. So that would have been the better option. I realized the mistake, but like Yeah, I forgot that requires a continuous trap to be face up in the monster zone. Granted, the opponent apparently didn't have anything there, which is kind of interesting. I think that game still was technically playable from both sides, but alas, good game. They were also very low on life points, and I was going to burn them for a whole bunch. I don't think I had a way of like actually killing them with the burn damage, but it was a significant amount of damage, so good game. All right, we're back with the deck, and honestly, this deck is pretty good. There's a lot to talk about in regards to what it actually accomplishes. First of all, it's not a bad control deck. Having access to additional control options, like as you can see, there's a ton of different options we have available to us for control. I elected to use DPE because I feel like being able to put 2 monsters into DPE is way strong right now, and just in general, I think it just provides a lot of value. Having that recursive body as well, it's similar in nature to like the Fiendsmith engine, which I think you also could play this as a part of a Fiendsmith engine. On top of that, you also have the ability to use some very powerful negates in the form of Apophis as well as Azure Rune, which are both very, very useful. On top of that, Statue of Anguish pattern with all of these cards is very good as well, being able to basically be up to 3 pops, so it's very, very useful alongside the Silo Hat, which is an additional spell trap removal. There's a lot of ways to genuinely control the game and, you know, slow down the pace of play from the opponent. Now, with that being said, if you were to go second, you very heavily rely on non-engine. There's not really anything your actual engine does, and it is very susceptible to almost any form of interaction, because this card, as well as continuous traps, happen to be very susceptible to pretty much everything. From negation to destruction to pretty much anything else in between. There's like a bajillion ways for these cards to be interacted with that just immediately invalidate them, which is the biggest issue, right? If Adra doesn't resolve, you just kind of lose, right? So that is another big thing, is that it is another going first deck that really heavily relies on going first and doesn't really provide you anything when going second. There's no advantage for going second. There's nothing that you gain from going second. In fact, more cards are just turned off because of that, right? So, a little annoying, right? However, that being said, I will say, I was very wrong about this deck. I went into this thinking this would be, again, Warrock tier bad. That being said, it is not. It is significantly better than I had given it credit for in my own brain, right? I didn't really talk too much about it. I kind of wrote it off as more or less not worth it. That being said, it actually does have quite a bit going for it, right? The field spell is very useful as additional ways of interaction. You have access to some very powerful trap activations, right? Alongside other cards, right? The Apophis, the Statue of Anguish pattern. Being able to get your like main combo piece off of a Link 2 is very useful as well, and it has quite a bit of room for non-engine. I'm running, you know, things... I'm basically only running 9 non-engine, the Maxi, the Fua, the Nibiru, and the Imperm, but you could also cut things like the DPE, you could cut some of the other continuous traps and stuff like that and play even more non-engine, or you could even go the other direction and play even more engine and more heavily rely on your luck, right? And just be like, I'll just go first, forehead. Now, even with all of that being said, I don't think this is a very good deck. And the main reason that I find issue with it is because almost every way that you could potentially play it has a better way of playing it. Do you want to play heavy traps? Cool, play Eldritch. That's just better. Right? You could just play Floodgates, and then bada bing, bada boom. That's just better. You want to play a bunch of non-engine? Cool, play Snake Eye. Just do a combo, play Snake Eye. There you go. Then you have a whole bunch of non-engine. Do you want to play a control deck? Just like a genuine control deck? Cool. You can play Primite Control, which is just better, because Drill Beam is an absolutely insane card. You can play Fiendsmith Control. Or you could play Lab. All of which are just better. You could also, if you wanted to, just play it with Paleo, but at that point, you could also just play Paleo with, like, Labyrinth cards, or just Paleo Pure, and these cards aren't really going to add or take away from anything, so there's not really a reason to play this. If you wanted to play it in Fiendsmith, there are other Fiendsmith variants that are just better. So pretty much every reason to play this deck has something that you would do instead of these cards that would just be better. which I think is the biggest downside. It's the same reason why a whole bunch of other combo decks aren't currently seeing a whole bunch of play. Manadeum is not as bad as people may make it out to be, even though it's significantly worse than something like Snake Eye. It's just another combo deck, and sure, it can still basically win the game automatically if it resolves, but no one's going to play it, because why do that when you could play a better one? It's why also no one is playing Yubel currently, because why play Yubel when you could play Snake Eye, which is just better? They're both more or less doing the same thing, which is winning when they go first through interaction. So, yeah. That's my biggest gripe with Argostars. It's a really cool concept, just not strong enough and not really providing any unique niches. It's right on that cusp of being an engine and being a full deck. So that's another gripe that I have with it. Cool concept, very solid, much better than I was anticipating it to be, and still not playable. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you guys did indeed enjoy. If you did, I like us very much, so appreciate it. And remember to always stay frosty. Bye-bye.